competency required to Level 2. This means that you must write up your summary of experience, including a statement at Levels 1 and 2. Some pathways allow candidates to take health and safety as a technical competency to a higher level, i.e., Level 3. You need to know about relevant BORICS guidance and key legislation, including how these affect your actions on-site and in the workplace. You also need a strong understanding of how to work safely and to take responsibility for the health and safety of those that you have a duty of care for. There may be health and safety considerations specific to your area of practice, such as fire safety, working at height, or asbestos risk. The BORICS Pathway Guide sets out the relevant knowledge, Level 1, and practical application, Level 2, for this competency. However, you do not need to have experienced everything listed, as this will depend on your experience and role. This chapter will explain what you should know concerning health and safety, covering the main requirements of Level 1. Legislation. The key primary legislation relating to health and safety at work in the UK is the Health and Safety at Work etc. Act 1974. We will also discuss a wealth of secondary legislation or statutory instruments, which provide further sector-specific legislation. The 1974 Act is enforced by the Health and Safety Executive (HSE), alongside local authorities. It requires employers to, as far as is reasonably practicable, ensure employees' health, safety and welfare at work. This includes staff training, welfare provision, safe working environments, and the provision of information, which is reflected in the BORICS guidance that we will discuss later in this chapter. If an employer has more than 5 employees, they must have a written health and safety policy. An employer's breach of the 1974 Act constitutes a criminal offense and can lead to an unlimited fine and/or up to 2 years imprisonment. A director or manager can also be liable for their company's breach if it was committed with consent or through neglect. An employee can also be held personally liable if they intentionally or recklessly interfere with or misuse anything provided concerning health and safety. The Workplace Health, Safety and Welfare Regulations 1992 apply to most workplaces, apart from construction sites or involving construction work, and cover various health and safety issues, such as ventilation, workstations, falling objects and windows. The Corporate Manslaughter and Homicide Act 2007 was a seminal piece of legislation defining the criminal offence of corporate manslaughter, or corporate homicide in Scotland. This is where the actions of a company, for example, management failure, lead to a gross breach of their duty of care, and the death of an employee or contractor. The penalties include an unlimited fine, imprisonment and disqualification of a member or senior management team members as a company director or directors. Surveyors must also be aware of the Occupiers Liability Act 1957 and 1984. The 1957 Act confirms that the occupier or a landlord in control of premises must take reasonable care to ensure the reasonable safety of visitors who have implied or expressed permission to be there, or a legal right of entry. The level of care depends on the nature of the visitors, so a much higher duty is owed to children than skilled visitors, who should be aware of the risks and measures to prevent harm. Under the 1957 Act, adequate warnings and signage may discharge the liability if they enable visitors to remain reasonably safe on site. The 1984 Act applies to trespassers rather than visitors. Trespassers are not invited onto a property, and their presence is unknown and not consented to. The 1984 Act applies where the occupier or a landlord in control of premises is aware of a danger and has reasonable grounds to believe that a trespasser may come into the vicinity of this danger. A common duty of care is established to take reasonable care for trespassers, although this is a lower duty of care than is owed to visitors under the 1957 Act. While the 1957 Act permits claims for death, personal injury and property damage, the 1984 Act only permits claims for the first two, i.e., not for property damage. Another essential health and safety issue that surveyors must be aware of is asbestos. Simply put, asbestos kills, so we must be mindful of the risks to advise our clients diligently and keep ourselves and others safe on site. Asbestos is a naturally occurring hazardous material, a fibrous mineral silicate, and harmful to health. If disturbed, it releases fibers into the atmosphere, which if inhaled can lead to asbestosis, a form of cancer. Asbestos comes in 3 forms: chrysotile light blue, amazite brown, and chrysotile white. Blue and brown asbestos were banned in the UK in 1985, whilst white asbestos was finally banned in 1999. Asbestos was historically used in many building materials. If a building was constructed pre-2000, you should always assume that asbestos may be present. Common asbestos-containing materials (ACMs) include acoustic plaster, adhesives, ceiling tiles, cement pipes, decorative plaster, ducting, fire curtains and doors, fireproofing, pipe insulation, roof felt, textured paint such as Artex and coatings, vinyl floor tiles, wallboard. Regulation 4 of the Control of Asbestos Regulations 2012 imposes a legal duty to manage asbestos if it is present or presumed to be present. The duty holder under the regulations will either be the owner, for example, of vacant premises, or occupier, for example, a tenant with an FRI lease, responsible for repairing and maintaining commercial premises and the common parts of domestic premises. In multi-let properties, the duty may be shared between both parties. Where a managing agent is instructed, the landlord duty holder cannot delegate their statutory duty to manage asbestos. However, the landlord can claim, contractually or in tort for a non-contractual duty, against the managing agent if any action or inaction contributes to the landlord's failure to comply as a duty holder. The managing agent will also have a duty to manage asbestos risk under the Health and Safety at Work etc. Act 1974. If the landlord is absent, the duty holder may acquire additional duty holder responsibilities, as they may be considered to be in charge of the property. Where the duty to manage under Regulation 4 does not apply, a duty arises, under Sections 2 and 3 of the Health and Safety at Work etc. Act 1974, to minimize the risk of asbestos in domestic premises. The Defective Premises Act 1972 and the Homes, Fitness for Human Habitation, Act 2018 also emphasize this duty in domestic premises. In the event of a substantial breach of the regulations, the penalties include an unlimited fine and up to 2 years imprisonment. If a property is suspected to contain asbestos, it is a legal requirement to commission an asbestos survey and report. This will identify and record the location, amount and type of any ACMs. A management plan should then be prepared to state how the risk of any ACMs present will be managed, including an asbestos register recording the location and condition of the ACMs. This will be used to manage ACMs during everyday occupation and use. Appropriate action should be taken to manage, repair or remove the asbestos in line with the survey and report. The asbestos register should be updated annually or more frequently if the risk of deterioration of the ACMs is high. The management plan should be reviewed every 6 months or after refurbishment, change of use or changes in company procedures. The management plan and register should be provided to anyone inspecting or working on the property. However, if the premises are to be refurbished or demolished, then a refurbishment/demolition survey will be required. If asbestos needs to be removed, it will be categorized as licensable, higher risk, for example, work involving loose fill insulation or asbestos millboard, or non-licensable, lower risk, for example, maintenance work involving asbestos cement products, or asbestos-containing vinyl floor tiles. A complete list is provided on the HSE website. For licensable asbestos, an HSE licensed contractor must be used and the work notified using an ASB 5 form, at least 14 days before works start. To remove non-licensable asbestos, contractors do not have to be licensed. However, they must use suitably trained workers to carry out the work. Some non-licensed work must, however, still be notified to the HSE, such as minor, short-duration work involving asbestos insulating board or insulation. Contractors must be placed under health surveillance by their GP, and written records kept of the work. ACMs must be disposed of at an Environment Agency licensed asbestos site in all cases. Surveyors must be familiar with the Borex Guidance Note Asbestos, Legal Requirements and Best Practice for Property Professionals and Clients, 4th edition. This confirms that all surveyors should have undertaken asbestos awareness training, as per Regulation 10 of the Control of Asbestos Regulations 2012. Other important health and safety issues to be aware of, particularly concerning property management, include Lifting Operations and Lifting Equipment Regulations 1998. This requires lifting equipment to be kept in a safe condition, safely positioned and installed and used safely. Smoke-free premises and enforcement Regulations 2007. This bans smoking in substantially enclosed workplaces and public places. The regulations also require no smoking signage to be displayed in these places. Legionnaire's disease. This is a potentially fatal form of pneumonia caused by Legionella bacteria, released into the air by purpose-built water systems, for example, air conditioning systems, evaporative condensers and hot tubs. Employers or those in control of premises must ensure that a specific risk assessment is carried out and systems are maintained correctly. This could include keeping water temperatures between 20 degrees Celsius and 45 degrees Celsius, and regularly servicing systems. The Construction Design and Management Regulations 2015 (CDM) are a key piece of legislation for all surveyors to be aware of. They aim to improve health and safety standards, management and coordination in the construction industry. CDM applies to all construction work on non-domestic and domestic properties. There are various roles defined under CDM, Figure 5.1. Under CDM, work is notifiable to the HSE via an F10 if it lasts over 30 days and has over 20 workers simultaneously working at any point, or exceeds over 500 person days of construction work. If a project is not notifiable, then the requirements of CDM still apply in full. Section 11 of the Landlord and Tenant Act 1985 sets repair standards for residential property leased for less than 7 years. This relates to the structure, exterior, mains services, supplies, sanitation, heating and heating water. The Housing Health and Safety Rating System (HHSRS) was introduced by the Housing Health and Safety Rating System, England, Regulations 2005 to meet the requirements for assessing hazards under the Housing Act 2004. The HHSRS is a risk-based evaluation tool that local authorities can use to identify and manage health and safety risks in rented residential property, for example, damp, mold, excessive cold, overcrowding, slip and trip hazards, faulty gas appliances, fire risks and dangerous electrical installations. The most serious hazards, for example, leaking roofs, rats or broken steps, are allocated a Category 1 rating and pose a serious threat to the health and safety of occupants and visitors. The local authority must take enforcement action concerning these hazards, such as hazard awareness notices, improvement notices, emergency remedial actions, prohibition orders and demolition orders. The Gas Safety Installation and Use Regulations 1998 require landlords to keep gas pipework, appliances, chimneys and flues in a safe condition. A gas safe registered engineer must undertake annual gas safety checks. The tenant must be given a copy before moving in, and subsequent checks must be provided to existing tenants within 28 days. The Electrical Safety Standards in the Private Rented Sector England Regulations 2020 apply to residential lettings, including assured shorthold tenancies ASTs and houses in multiple occupation HMOs. Figure 5.1 CDM roles. Electrical installations, including fixed wiring, but not portable appliance testing, must be inspected, and an Electrical Installation Condition Report, EICR, must be provided by a competent person, for example, an electrician registered with NICEAC and or Alexa, every 5 years.